Rock isn't dead. It's in flux.
Hi everyone, I'm Britt with Rock and Flux, and I'm joined today by the band Black Doldrums. Can you both give an introduction to yourselves and then also kind of give some information about how Black Doldrums got started as a band?
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie.
I'm Kevin. I play guitar and sing.
So we're Black Doldrums, and we have a third member, Matthew, who plays bass. He joined about 2 years ago now.
Mhm.
So we started the band some years ago now, about 5 or 6 years ago. We started as a duo. We still technically are like the original
Sort of founding
band,
members, I suppose, yeah.
But we decided to get a bass player to kind of really expand the live set. But how did we start? Do you want to?
Well, I suppose I had a lot of songs. I've always written songs and had a lot of songs left over from previous projects over the years. And me and Sophie met through a love of music. Our first conversation was about Joy Division. And we always actually managed to forget that. And obviously, we're in a sort of a relationship and stuff for quite some time. And we really sort of connected over music and stuff like that, and actually had quite different tastes as well. So I think the band sort of brought our tastes together and sort of met in the middle. And like I say, I had loads of songs left over from previous songwriting projects, and Sophie basically decided to sort of play drums on some tracks I was working on, and it kind of went from there. And we always intended on getting more members, but we were sort of doing it as a duo for quite some time, just because it kind of worked for the sort of material that we're working on. And as Sophie says, in more recent years, we've got a third member to play bass and stuff like that, just because some of the songs that we're working on are more sort of complicated and require that for a live setting.
Makes sense. So if you could choose one song for people who have never heard your band before or your music before, one song that you would suggest for them to listen to first, what would that song be?
What do you reckon? Either Sad Paradise or Dreamcatcher?
Yeah, one of the two. I think probably Sad Paradise will be a good introduction.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. So let's listen to Sad Paradise so people can get a taste of what your music sounds like. What about that song do you like? I can understand why you would choose that song as someone who has listened to all of your music, but why, out of curiosity, would you say that it would be representative of you all?
So, it was a lead-in single from the album, but I think it just because we've come on quite a journey, because when we were a duo, we used to really make as much noise and as many layers as possible for two people. It always kind of felt like a bit of a disproving project of like, no, like two people can make this much noise and have this many layers, and we can sound like there's more than two people in this band. And then I think when we started to work on the album, we just approached it completely differently, and we wanted more space. And Jared, who we worked with on the album, saw something behind the layers, I think, when we did a series of shows with him. So he really wanted to bring that out as well. So then when we started writing that album, I think Sad Paradise kind of symbolised that move from where we had come from to where we ended up. And also, like, when we recorded it, obviously there was parts to the song that I hadn't even heard before, because when we rehearsed it, the two of us, we were just rehearsing the bare basics of it, and then when we recorded it, I was like, oh my god, there's all these like guitar parts that I hadn't even heard before that Kev put down, and I was like, this is a completely different song to how I imagined it. Like, I liked it before, and then when I heard it, I was like, wow, this is really good.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that kind of developed over time, and I think it's one of the first songs that we kind of done for the album where we felt like we kind of found our sound a bit more, and we had a bit more confidence at this point to not overplay, not have songs lasting too long. It's very concise, very to the point. I think it comes in like 2 minutes 40, which is kind of unheard of for us previously with previous releases. So it felt good just to sort of nail it under 3 minutes, and now it's sort of part of the set and everything like that. So yeah, it's one of our favourites.
Do you think that working with a producer and having that kind of third-party perspective, is that what you feel like made the difference too? Hearing that song once it was recorded for the album versus when you were playing it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah, because I think you can be too close to a project, you can be too close to a song, and it can be a bit too personal, and you need someone else who's kind of unbiased just to take out that guitar part or take out that synth part or something that you are adamant that it's going to work. But it's good that if you get another perspective on it, and then a bit of time, a bit of breathing space from the song, and you kind of let it live by itself and live in a sort of live setting as well, where you sort of develop it. And it's nice, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that song as well is quite poignant as well, because it's named "Sad Paradise," which is from a favourite poem of ours by Allen Ginsberg. It's actually sort of taken inspiration from that, as it featured in one of my favourite books at the time, On the Road. And when me and Sophie met, I was actually reading the book, but I'd actually lost it that week. And we met, and she was reading it, and in her bookmark was on the page "Sad Paradise."
No, it was Denver Doldrums.
Denver Doldrums, which is the poem that "Sad Paradise" comes from, which is just really bizarre, and I just thought it was really strange, and it just sort of always stuck around. So we had to sort of put that in a song or an idea. Yeah.
Well, actually, my bookmark was a tube ticket from 2007, which was 3 years before we met. And I was like, what the hell? Like, when I opened it up again, I was like, that's mental.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really cool story, because I mean, what are the odds of that? It's almost like it's meant to be. That's a nice story. And so the album that Sad Paradise is on is called Dead Awake. You released that last year, right?
yeah.
And that is your first official full-length album that you've released. What was the recording process like, since you hadn't really been adding other people? You were saying it was just the two of you. Did that change any of the other like songwriting that you did for the album itself, or did you kind of have like most of those songs already kind of prepared?
Yeah, they were all prepared, but we kind of wanted it to sound like, we didn't just want it to sound like the other stuff where it was like throw 10 guitars at it and that's then going to be replicated with all of the effects that we use live. It was more like, okay, we're going to have 1 or 2 guitars on each song. We shared the bass, didn't we? So we did put bass on it, but the bass wasn't like a main part. Whereas with the album that we're writing now, obviously we have a really good bass player who's way better at bass than either of us can do. So that will take a more of a lead part. But yeah, we shared that, and then since we had written before, but then there was a few things that we changed along the way with that. But yeah, on the whole, it was kind of, we had the skeleton of it. Kev is really organised. He does spreadsheets for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have to sort of keep track of songs and stuff, because you kind of come up with ideas and then you sort of shelve it, and then it can sort of sit there for a while, and then it'll sort of haunt you. So you've got to like keep track of stuff, and I kind of like recycling ideas as well, because you just don't know what might sort of come back. Yeah. So this first album, it was mainly all prepared, but there was a few ideas in there that were sort of kicking around for some time.
Your music is very drum heavy and very guitar heavy, but the guitars oftentimes have a lot of echo on them. How do you get that sound? And do you still use those effects when you play those songs live?
Yeah. I mean, starting off with the drums, I mean, we basically write the songs together really people look to me for an initial idea, perhaps, but really a lot of the time it comes from a rhythm or a drum beat and stuff. Especially with how Sophie plays, it's kind of very signature drumming. I think she'll come up with like a hook and a really good groove and sort of stick to it. So it's kind of we kind of like that approach where if you find something good, stick to it without being too complicated and stuff.
I think that might be why I like your music a lot, because I always tend to listen to those first. I don't know why. The drums, they shine in a lot of your songs, which I don't think that many bands do that, honestly. So I like it, and I find it interesting. I mean, obviously, they're always an integral part, but I don't know. I feel like oftentimes it kind of just becomes a background versus a foreground of certain songs. And I think we'll give them a little bit more attention in the actual structure of the song itself.
That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah, we do put some focus on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was originally, like, when I think about it, I think it was born out of insecurity, because I'm self-taught. So I was like, especially when it was two of us, I was always like, it has to be interesting, because there's things that I just, I technically can't do, because I haven't been playing the drums since I was 10 years old, and I haven't been taught by a drum teacher. So my priority was creating something interesting and having a drum hook. I wanted to have something recognizable that was a hook. And I guess that's actually worked out really well for us, because it has become like a really significant and recognizable part of how we sound.
Yeah.
You have a definitive sound that is different than other things that I've heard. I've told some other people about you all, and I was trying to think to myself, like, how can I describe this music? Because it's really, there's nothing else that I've really heard like it. So the way I've described it, and I hope that you all are okay with this, but I described it as, if I had to, I was like, it's kind of like Interpol meets Oasis. They kind of have a little bit of a different sound. And then you also have those elements of bands like Oasis that are more of like a more classic rock sound. I don't know. So that's how I compare. That's what I used, because I think your sound is so interesting. So
we've got our friend Martin drives us on tour, and he was like, "You're a goth Oasis." He was like, "That's how I describe you," and I was like, "That makes total sense to us." But if someone who doesn't know music so much is like, "Okay, so what is it?" and I'm like, well, our driver describes us as a goth Oasis. They're like, "What?"
I mean, that is a good example too. That's all side kind of comes in. And I knew those people had listened to that before, so that's why I use them as a comparison. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty accurate. Now, and let me ask you this too. So you were saying that you had some insecurities because you're self-taught. Is it also as just being a woman in this scene, which is, I mean, it's male dominated, especially I feel for drummers? Did that play into it at all, or do you feel like, as a woman, playing live and being in this industry, do you feel differently about that, or that you maybe feel like you have to prove yourself more, even though we shouldn't have to feel that way?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think I wish that I wish that there was like a second dimension where I could compare how I felt as a trained taught drummer. But yeah, I think I always felt like I had something to prove. So if I made a mistake, I would always kind of beat myself up about it, because I'd be like, "You're not even doing anything that complicated." And all of those people out there are looking at you and thinking, "Oh my God, she's not even doing anything that complicated, and she's just made a mistake." So I think I'd always feel this pressure, like it has to be right. And I do think like part of that might be, if I was male, I might not feel the same kind of pressure. And I think I don't get it so much now, but a few years ago, and maybe this is because there's more girls in bands, and it's becoming more of like, you see more female bands on like really big festival lineups. So there's not so much of it. But I used to have more of these kind of like positive discrimination comments. So I'd get things like, and it's really hard when people say stuff like this, because you can't say, that's really offensive. Don't say that. I know they mean it in a nice way. But I've had comments like, "Oh, like, you've only got little arms. How are you doing it like that?" Or, I get a lot of comparisons to other female drummers, and I think, why is it constrained to this kind of like, you can only be compared to other drummers who just happen to be female? So that can be quite frustrating. And sometimes I get a lot of like, oh, you go girl. And I think, why does this rub me up the wrong way? Because it's a positive thing, it's nice, but then at the same time there's just something that just sits a little bit off. And I don't know, like maybe I have to like think about why that, I don't know if it irritates me, but why do I find that uncomfortable? I guess the biggest thing is that I never wanted to be judged or looked upon as like, oh, that drummer's really good, because they see what you look like or like what gender you are first. I mean, years ago when I was quite bad, really, because I was just trying to get to grips with it, I remember someone came up to me after a gig and he was like, oh my God, you're amazing. You're just like Keith Moon. And I was like, really not. That is so inaccurate, because Keith Moon was on a completely different level. And I just thought, you're just saying that because I'm a girl. I'm nothing like Keith Moon. But you can't say that, because I was like, this guy's really excited. But yeah, it's a tricky one, really.
Yeah. And I mean, and you all have done several tours in mainly around the UK, but also in other areas of Europe, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how does the audience take all of you? And do you feel like there is any different treatment when you're at venues or by the crowds or anything like that? Or have people like been fine?
Generally, quite positive, really. And it's quite similar, really, actually, thinking about it. Quite a similar response, I think, wherever we go. Obviously, North of England, Scotland is always a really good gig. Very lively crowds and stuff, if you've ever been. In France, particularly cool.
It depends where you go, because I think I think you have this in America as well. I remember when we played in New York and it was like really cold. And then when we went to San Francisco, like the crowd was just dancing. But I remember someone saying to us, like, you better enjoy San Francisco because you're not going to have this in LA. And then we went to LA and it was like, it was fine. And I was thinking, like, listen, you don't know, London crowds can be quite reserved. Manchester, funnily enough, can be quite reserved. They'll like cheer really loudly after the song, but when you're playing, they're just standing there staring at you.
Yeah, I think we sussed out that in Manchester, they study gigs. So you think they're being quiet, but they're actually taking it all in. And they're all taking notes and, really, really taking it all in and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I feel like they have such a history, that area of so much talent coming out of Manchester. So you would think that they'd be like, more a rambunctious crowd. So that's interesting to hear that.
I mean, I remember, last year there was a few people dancing, but generally, like I think the appreciation is heard more between songs. Everyone complains about London, but I think we're just so used to London now. That's just how it is. Yeah.
Like just reserved crowds. They don't like move around a lot or anything. Is that why?
It depends. I think it depends what time of the day it is, and if at a festival, if you're on at 10 o'clock, everyone's smashed and everyone's dancing. But I think London crowds can be more reserved. But again, like similar to Manchester, you'll get like really good turnouts and everyone's enjoying it, and you'll sell loads of merch. But they just they see so much, they're just like really focused on what's happening.
Did you do a full tour of the full United States?
We did
did New York.
We did New York, San Francisco, Oakland.
Yeah.
So we did Manhattan and Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And then we did some dates in LA, but it was really undercover. Like there was no visas.
Just like a brief one.
Yeah.
Well, don't say that.
It's not.
Don't send it to like the guys that work at JFK.
We just put a few guitar pedals in socks. It's fine.
Yeah.
How was that experience then? If it was just kind of like a secret in and out type of thing, like, do you have any good stories of when you were here, or anything be like memorable?
Oh, I forgot where I was going. So the guy in security was like, "So where are you staying?" And I couldn't remember, so I just pointed at her and said, "Oh, she's got the address."
Yeah, and I was like, we literally discussed this on the plane several
I
times.
was like, "Oh, they've got guns."
He was like, "Where are you staying?" And Kev said, "Brooklyn." And I was like,
he meant whereabouts in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I need an address, sir. And we were like, and I kind of was like, oh, do I? So in the end, I went, he's with me. Like, we're staying at this place. And I think they just were like, yeah, okay, let him in. I actually tried to dress really American because I was like, I don't want them to be suspicious and like get up cases and be like, what's this like guitar pedal? So I was wearing this Tommy Hilfiger jumper and just like these blue jeans. And
I was going to ask, what would you all think is like an American way to dress?
I know. I was just trying to look as like not like a band as much as possible, and I was like, yeah, I'm just here on holiday.
Offensive at all. I'm so, it always so interesting to me what other people's perspectives are, because I have friends from Australia and they'll give their, like, everyone has a different thought process, so I just think that's funny. Tommy Hilfiger, I mean, that is an American brand, so I understand.
Yeah.
So. Well, you made it through, so that was positive.
Through, and I mean, I deleted Facebook messages from promoters. I was so paranoid that we were going to get caught, but it was fine. I mean, we posted merch to some girl in New York, and then when we left to go home, we just carried all the instruments with us that we'd sent over there, and no one cared. And I was like, yeah, that's fine.
I figured they wanted rid of us by then anyway.
Well, I mean, they probably just didn't think anything of it because people come over here to do that stuff all the time. So, especially with leaving, they were just like, whatever, most likely. How long ago was that?
Oh God, was that like 2017, I think, was it?
It's got to be 18, 19. 2017
or 18, yeah.
Probably before COVID, because I feel like that they would have probably been more strict after COVID than before, just because of all the travel restrictions and stuff.
Yeah, and also we weren't flying into Austin or anything at the time of PsychFest because there's quite a few bands that were being sent back because they didn't have visas and then they weren't believed that they weren't going to be earning loads of money. Whereas like we weren't there at any particular festival, so we did just go in and it was fine. And like we were literally earning nothing from it. We got paid, but it was no way going to be paying more than what we'd spent to get there.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to come back on like a real tour at any time?
Love to.
Yeah, we'd love to. Yeah, just
but we'd have to
organise it now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best way to do it probably would just to be either do a split release with the next album, so have it released on Fuzz Club and then maybe have a label in America that can do it. And then also have a booking agent based in the States as well, because we have our EU booking agent. But that would be the best way to do it, really, because then we wouldn't have to bring any merch and we can just have everything organised that way.
Right. That makes sense. You all have several other pieces of music. You released a remix album. And it's funny because earlier today I talked to the KBB and they mentioned that they did a remix for you all several years ago. So I was like, it's a small world because that's who I'm talking to next. So how did that come about? I mean, you're both from the UK. Did you all just meet at a show and that's kind of how that came out?
We've never actually met them in person.
No.
Or not, even though they're in... Actually, are they in Berlin or London now? I can't remember.
I think they live in Berlin, I'm not
sure.
They
were in London,
but
yeah, basically we...
Kev just sent Nick a message on Facebook last year and he was like, Fuzz Club wants some remixes. Do you want to do one? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great moment, really. I'm a huge fan of their music and everything. And it was a direct question, just, would you like to remix something for us?
Yeah.
He was happy to do it and stuff and sent it through pretty quickly and stuff. So
nice. I'm noticing that's like becoming a really popular thing, especially you're not as like synth heavy as bands like the KVB, but I still feel like you kind of fit into that whole niche of like Drab Majesty and those bands that are getting really popular. And I have noticed that a lot of them do remixes for each other. What was the reason behind you all doing a remix album? Was it just because you wanted to do different variations of songs, or is it because like it is gaining popularity just in general?
Well, the remix album was really that was actually during when was that? Was that 2020?
One of the lockdown things.
Yeah, so that was during lockdown, so we were supposed to tour in Europe that year, and we were also supposed to record our album in Philadelphia with Jared. So he was like, "Oh, guys, like you can see the Rocky statue," and then the whole world just closed down.
Yeah.
We literally, like, obviously we couldn't do anything, we couldn't do any gigs, like nothing was happening, and we were like, we've literally just had the best year ever. We've just done tour dates with the Vacant Lots. Jared's doing the album. We're supposed to be flying out. We're supposed to have an EU tour. It's all gone down the toilet, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we thought, well, we need to keep up momentum. So we did this remix album.
Yeah.
Well, Kev did the remix album. I listened to it and said, yeah.
Yeah.
And then contacted a few sort of blogs and magazines and got it out there a bit.
It was quite a nice process, though, to actually hear our music sort of stripped back a bit, I think. And I think that's kind of where it all started going to sort of help us to take a slightly different direction that we did when we worked with Jared and stuff. Because when I did the remixes, I kind of stripped back all the guitars, and I was left with some interesting bass lines, some synth parts that Sophie played that we completely forgot about. So it's quite interesting to have a listen to that and just listen to it from a different angle. And I think it really helped us. And when we sort of approached KVP to do the remix of Dreamcatcher, I think it just helps to see another layer to the song, almost to say like the song's not quite finished. I quite like that as well, because now when we sort of play it, it kind of feels like a hybrid of the KVP remix with the album track. And I kind of like that. I like it a bit more, fluid and stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting how that can kind of change your perspective on a song. It's like hearing different versions and then mixing them. One of my favorite songs that I think you released it on an EP, but it's She Divine. And I read that was actually produced by Pat Collier, who's produced bands like Jesus Mary Chain. How did that song come about, and how did you work with him as a producer?
He was introduced to us by our first label. So we released a couple of EPs on AC30 label. They knew Pat. He did a fair bit of recording for some of the bands on that label, and got introduced to him. And it was great to work with Pat. He's an absolute machine in the studio.
He actually engineered Dead Awake as well.
Yeah. He also engineered that as well. Yeah. It was really, really quick. Like a lot of people.
It was. It was like instant.
It was like a day or something, and it just came back really, really quickly. Really, had the song sort of knocking about, and recorded it in a day.
Yeah,
it's just one of those ones where it lands, and then people will still talk about it, and it's still people's favourites as well. It's bizarre, really. I can't really tell you much more than that. It's just one of those gems that just sort of you playing around one.
It's the way the guitars are in the beginning, and then the vocals a little bit more. It's got a lot of reverb on it. I don't know, something about it I just really enjoy listening to. I think it's a really cool song.
Cool.
Yeah, people do. Yeah. People still ask for it at the merch table, and I'm like, we've sold out. Yeah.
What format? So, like, you sell music at your shows and things like that. Do you do CDs, vinyl, tapes? Like, what format do you typically choose to sell it in?
Well, it's vinyl, but we're going to start bugging Fuzz Club to do CDs, because I feel like CDs are coming back with a vengeance, because everyone's asking for them.
Yeah.
We don't have any, and all I can do is say, oh, well, you could download it and burning it onto a CD. And I'm like, God, have you heard yourself? Like, or you could put this record in the tumble dryer so it shrinks and give that a go.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to a few different bands who have said the same thing, that they're hoping that CDs are coming back and that they are starting to. Isn't it funny how I feel like things are so cyclical, and I feel like right now there's this big push for like 90s culture, which to me are like the heyday of purchasing CDs. That was like how we could buy music, but now the problem with that's going to be that you're going to have. I had just said on my earlier conversation, I was like, we need to bring back boom boxes, which were like the stereo that had the tape and the radio and the CD player all in one, because there's no CD players on computers anymore. They're not in cars anymore. So it's like, how are we gonna, we're gonna get back to that where you're like plugging in the CD player into the cigarette lighter and playing it that way. We're gonna have skipping music all the time. So it's just crazy.
I guess as long as people just are happy that it's still round. Whatever it is. Yeah.
Another question that I ask everybody who comes on this show, it's because it's kind of the branding, is the branding is rock isn't dead, it's in flux. So I ask everybody, because it's the favorite saying of people now is that rock is dead. I personally don't think it is. I think it just looks different, and I think it's very niche nowadays versus how maybe it used to be. I'd be curious as to both of your thoughts on that.
I reckon, in terms of music theory, it's there. It's there in everything. I mean, most music is basically the same, right? So there's only 12 notes. You hear all manner of rhythms on different kinds of tracks, whether it's electronic, hip hop, or rock, or what have you. So in that sense, it's still there. I don't think it will go away at all. People starting bands and picking up guitars. I think that need for an instant gratification with hitting one chord as hard as you can, I don't think that'll ever go away. I mean, maybe it won't be in mainstream, or maybe it won't be as popular, but that need to just make a racket will never go away, I don't think.
Yeah. And also, obviously, it isn't country now bigger than hip hop, or they're the same, I think.
I think it depends on the demographic, like who wants to actually purchase music versus listening on streaming. And I think that also goes to, like, not to be ageist, but like age demographics and things like that, because they're not necessarily going to have Spotify if they're in their 50s, but someone in their 20s definitely probably will. So I think that probably plays into it too, as far as sales and things like that.
So I think as well, it's like what is actually being pushed out there by the record companies, like the big ones, what they're willing to invest their money in. And a lot of the time they're willing to kind of invest their money in carbon copies of really kind of bland acoustic music, and that's what a lot of people see as being rock music. But obviously you've got labels like Partisan that are putting out more exciting bands, but then I guess after you have certain bands kind of getting through and becoming really, really big, like Fontaines DC, for example, now we've seen over the last maybe 3 years just an explosion of this kind of like post-punk that is all very sounding like the same, and it's like very kind of, I don't mean like their music is one-dimensional, but it's one dimension of what post-punk was. There's not like a big explosion of like really like gothic sounding bands, for example, that were post-punk as well. It's all kind of that same like disco and funk beat with like a kind of Marky Smith sounding vocal. And I think that's a lot of what is rock music now to someone that might only pick up on what they hear on mainstream radio. Whereas like we know that there's like so much more than that going on. But then I suppose years ago, what you heard on the radio that was rock music was like Guns N' Roses, and it was like all this kind of hair metal and glam bands, and that's not what is the mainstream now. And then you've got like someone like Johnny Marr saying, oh, thank God there's guitar music and stuff like that. I just think, really? Because there's so much more with people playing guitars and stuff, that just because, I don't know, I would expect more from someone like that, for example, or even like Liam Gallagher, who would say that his favourite bands are like The Who and the Beatles. And I think, please, can you just tap into what's actually going on? Because there's so much more.
Right. And it's great. And even if it doesn't have guitar, it doesn't have to have guitar to be rock music or to sound great, So anything you would want else that you would want listeners to know about Black Doldrums, or what you all have coming up next?
Our next show is in London at the Lexington, and probably our only headline show in London this year, actually, because soon after that we'll be in Europe for a tour.
Yeah.
So check all our socials for details about that. That'd be great.
And then we're recording our second album.
Yeah, second album's coming along this year.
Yeah.
Any idea on a date for that, or like a time frame?
I would imagine probably starting it. I mean, we have already started it, and we're talking with a really, really exciting producer. I'm not going to say it is yet, but I'm still kind of like actually pinching myself that this person was like, yeah, okay, I'll work with you. Yeah, it's just kind of unbelievable.
The way things are now, if you just try, you can kind of make something happen, and you think to yourself like, there's no way. But I don't know. I feel you guys are great, so you got to give yourself some credit, for that, because your music is really good. But you lose 1% of the shots you don't take. That's the saying, right? So
yeah,
got to try.
Yeah, like you're the only person standing in your way, I guess. So yeah, so we've got that, and he's coming round on Friday to our house to listen to the demos and give us his thoughts. So he's a he, but that will be announced soon, and very excited about that. Done some really big stuff, so that's really exciting. And then we got our EU tour, so you can have a look at the dates for that and see if any of the listeners are living in those cities or nearby. We're playing a big goth festival in September. I think it's like the 7th or the 8th. I think Skeletal Family are headlining the Friday night that we're playing. And then me and Kev are getting married at the end of September, so that's going to be it.
That's a nice way to cap off the year.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I'm sure the listeners really want to know that.
I like to know it. Well, congratulations on everything, and you're going to need a good honeymoon after all that too. So
yeah,
good timing. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking to me. You guys have been great. So
thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.